Welcome back to 2K Away. Alrighty, welcome back to 2K Away. We're two sisters 2,000 miles apart, and we talk about murder and all the creepy stuff. So today's going to be another murder. So I don't really have any business, but we did get an email from a friend of ours about our Rasputin episode, and I really wanted to read it out. I'm not going to say her name because I asked her and she sucks and hasn't replied yet. She's listening to this. So I'm not going to say her name just in case she didn't want me to actually say it or anything. But I wanted to read her email out, which she didn't
amazing.
give me, she didn't give me permission to do, but I'm taking my own. It's fine.
It's fine. We grew up with her.
It's fine. If anything, she can literally text me and be like, hey, you suck. And I'll be like, okay. So I really wanted to read this email out because she was a history major. So she took classes on Russia during this time and everything. So I really wanted to read out her email to us. So she starts out, hi. She goes, obviously, as a history person, I really enjoyed the episode on Rasputin. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that seemingly affected perception about Rasputin during this time. Something consistent within the Russian hierarchy since its fruition was the constant power struggle between the Duma, which is the aristocracy, and the Tsar and Tsarina themselves. Previously, the Duma basically made the critical decisions for the country, while the Tsar was kind of just a figurehead for the state, but was informed and could change any decision's course if he deemed it necessary. She said, if I had to compare it, it would be like how the British royal family is now, but without the care for any type of public service, because at this time, no royal really gave two shits about the general population because they didn't understand it, which is very true.
Very true.
She said, after Peter the Great, the tide shifted and the czars began to take more control in the decision-making process. And the Duma was like, wait, what the fuck? Stay in your lane. But because he was a czar, they just had to deal with it. So she said, when a peasant / religious man comes into a seat of power and is assisting the Tsar and Tsarina with military and social affairs, it definitely rubs any ruling aristocratic families the wrong way. Second, she said, similarly, the Greek Orthodox religion was deeply embedded into the Russian consciousness, more notably the peasantry. Any deviation from that was deemed heresy, as the aristocracy had access to education and, more notably, the shifting social ideals that expanded across Europe. A good lot of them weren't as devout as the uneducated, in quotes, backwards general population. So if the story about the peasant lady taking it upon herself to stab him is rooted in fact, my assumption would be because she determined his religious heresy along with whatever sins he wanted to commit to atone for was grounds for death. I don't know why anyone would want to bang his sea cucumber penis. So then she said, lastly, I think the myth of cutting off his penis was spread for a couple of reasons. She said, just assuming. In a male-dominated society, what makes someone male? Having a dong. So by spreading the rumor that he was emasculated, maybe they believed it would dilute any respect for him or the regime that supported him. And she said, also, the amount of rumors floating around about his sexual prowess, and she said, ew, he was scary. I agree with Paige 100%.
I'm telling you.
She said rape. She said, all the rumors floating around about his sexual prowess, rape, orgies, etc. It would only make sense to cut off the piece of him that would be so tied to any sexual acts.
Yeah, I agree with how she said they would spread the rumor to basically emasculate him.
Right. Because when I replied, I was like, well, with the email, it kind of made me think of when killers that typically target women, if they have like such a hatred for women, they'll mutilate genitalia or cut off breasts because that's what makes that person a woman. So they have to get rid of it, basically.
Right.
She said, I took a class on Russia and reviewed some of my info on Rasputin from A History of Russia by a lot of names that I don't know. Goldfrank Hughes Stites, but there's another one that I don't know how to pronounce. I'm very sorry. Obviously, it is a boring history book, LOL. But she goes, love the podcast. So thank you to our friend that sent that. Again, I won't say your name just because I don't have permission to say it or not. But that was my only bit of business I had. I really loved this email, by the way. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So today we're going to be talking about a man named Oba Chandler.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Well, he's not a good guy, and we'll find out.
Probably could have guessed that.
Yeah. Also, the name Oba is very unusual.
Oba.
O-B-A. Oba.
Maybe it's Abba.
No, it's Oba. No.
I like it. Aw.
No. It's an O.
Okay.
Jesus. All right. So, Oba Chandler was born October 11th, 1946 in Cincinnati, Ohio, to parents Oba Chandler Sr., so it's a family name apparently, and Margaret Johnson. Yeah, I was like, I don't think I've ever heard that name before.
Mm-mm.
So that's one of the reasons why he stuck out to me. And then I read about his case and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know like a ton about him. I did watch this documentary where his sister talked about like one time when he made like a stick with a knife attached to it and was like killing mice like that.
Oh, like what's her name? The possible
like
Jill
what's
the Ripper.
her name?
No, like Jill the Ripper, the one that you did, Mary Piercy.
Yeah, but she didn't attach a knife to a stick. She
know,
killed her with a fire poker.
The way you said it made me think like killing mice.
Yeah.
Like she was chanting.
Right. So in 1957, when Oba was 10 years old, and this is actually considered like a turning point in his life. And investigators later on, when they do research into his background, are like, oh, here's where it began.
Oh.
So at 10 years old, his father hung himself in the basement of the family home, and Oba found him.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So at the funeral, this is weird. At the funeral, Oba threw himself into his father's open grave and kicked the coffin as the gravediggers were trying to like cover the coffin with dirt.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Very, very strange. Yeah. So they considered this as like the turning point from where he went from maybe a little bit of a screwed up kid to not a good guy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So he began stealing cars at around like age 14 and was said to have been arrested at least 20 times as a juvenile.
Holy crap.
Yeah, he was. And again, like, I couldn't find any kind of what the relationship between he and his mother were like.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really find anything as far as like the relationship between him and his parents. I don't know. I tried, but there was just not a lot of information out on it because I would have liked to, after I will discuss his crimes, I would have liked to have known more of the relationship between he and his mother. But unfortunately, I just couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So in adulthood, he was charged with a variety of different offenses, like possession of counterfeit money, loitering, which is kind of random, burglary, kidnapping, and armed robbery.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so immediately not a good person. He was also accused of masturbating while looking into a woman's window. So add peeping Tom.
Oh my goodness.
To this, yes. And there was even an incident, and I think he did do time for this. I'm not actually quite sure, but there was an incident where Oba and some accomplice of some sorts whose name I could not find. They broke into a Florida couple's home. He eventually did make his way to Florida. I don't know of the travels between, but he found himself in Florida.
Goodness.
So they broke into this couple's home. They held them at gunpoint and robbed them. The accomplice tied the husband up with speaker wire, while Oba took the wife into the bedroom where he made her strip down to her underwear, tied her up, and then rubbed the barrel of his revolver across her stomach.
Oh my gosh.
Which is almost creepier than anything else.
Than just like shooting her or something. I mean,
yeah.
That adds a whole level of creep and terror into what's happening.
Yes. And when I describe crimes later that he was convicted of, you're going to understand that a little bit more.
Oh no, I don't want to understand that.
It's weird. It's disgusting. Oh. I'm just going to go through and say Oba Chandler was a fucking disgusting person.
Oh no.
So now we're going to talk about the Rogers family. We're going through all the way up. On May 26, 1989, Joan, or Joe Rogers, 36, her daughters Michelle, age 17, and Christe, age 14, left their family dairy farm in Wilshire, Ohio, for a vacation in Florida. So the Rogers family was very close. They all worked on the dairy farm together. The father's name was Hal. Very, very wholesome. Very wholesome family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they went to church. They had this dairy farm. Michelle and Christe were just your typical normal girls. So
I don't like where this is going.
Unfortunately, they did experience some trauma before they went on their vacation. So John Rogers, which is Hal, the father, his brother, he was also not a good person.
Uh-oh.
He was accused of raping a former girlfriend / roommate. I got both. I didn't exactly know what relationship he had to this woman. It could have been both. But he did end up doing time for this. But before that, it came out that he had been molesting Michelle. And it was like quite a few years. I think at one point he even lived on the dairy farm in like a separate like trailer or something on the property and was like working on the dairy farm. And during that time, he was molesting Michelle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Michelle didn't want to testify and didn't want to have a trial. So the charges against him for Michelle's was dropped. But he did end up going to prison for the rape of this former roommate / girlfriend eventually.
Good.
But
good, where he belongs.
Right. So all the trauma from this and all the gossip from local people was one of the reasons for the vacation.
Sure.
They just wanted to distance themselves and just kind of get away and just be a family for a little while.
Yeah.
But
like they deserve.
Yeah. But Hal ended up staying behind to tend to the farm.
Oh.
Yeah, because it was a family farm. Like he didn't have anybody working for him. So he decided to stay behind and tend to the farm. The girls were so excited for this trip.
I don't like what you're doing to me right now.
It was the first time that they had left Ohio.
Oh my gosh. How old were the girls?
17 and 14. And it would be the very first time that they would be leaving Ohio.
Oh my gosh.
To go on vacation in Florida. And they decided to drive the family car down to Florida. I have it written down later. It was like an 84 like blue Oldsmobile. And it was like Kalia, I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't remember. But it basically looked like my first car. So so very wholesome. And I know they along the trip, like they went to like Disneyland and they were like doing all these things. They were going to the beach and they even like made a few stops along the way to Florida. Yeah. Again, basing on Joan's age, they had the girls pretty young.
Yeah.
So they were basically just like working and raising children, and then they finally decided to have a vacation. So now I'm gonna rip your heart out.
You already have.
Sunday morning, June 4th of 1989, 3 unidentified female bodies were found floating in Tampa Bay.
Oh no.
Not floating together. They were found in different places in the bay, and they were first given the identities of Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3.
Oh my gosh.
So all 3 bodies were found floating face down, bound with rope around the neck, and naked below the waist.
Oh my goodness.
Autopsy showed all 3 victims had water in their lungs, which means they had been thrown in the water, bound while still alive.
Oh my god.
They had all been sexually assaulted. Ropes with concrete blocks at the other end had been tied around the victims' necks to ensure they died either from suffocation or drowning, and that their bodies wouldn't be found. But the bodies became bloated from the decomp and floated to the surface.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So if there's air in the lungs of a dead body that's been thrown into the water, they're going to float to the surface eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll show you pictures after this, because these aren't pictures that I'm going to post or anything. But I'll show you the pictures. Even if they did have identity, like, they couldn't be recognized. It was really rough. Yeah. The bodies being found in the water obviously makes this a million times harder, because
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, because technically the crime scene is water.
Yeah.
So investigators gathered all the trace evidence they could get from the bodies and immediately sent them to the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
So Detective James or Jim Capel with the St. Petersburg Police Department, who was initially in charge of the investigation, he contacted experts to try and pinpoint between wind, water, where the bodies floated, boats. So he contacted the University of Florida and the United States Coast Guard. And experts from both these places, really, they estimated from currents and patterns that the victims were definitely thrown from a boat, not a bridge or dry land, and between 2 and 5 days before they were found.
Oh, man.
So they canvassed the area and interviewed hundreds of people to try and identify these women.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they're not going to get anywhere because they're not from there.
Right.
So then the police get a call from a manager at a local Days Inn hotel 4 days later after the bodies were discovered. He tells police that a room registered to a woman named Joan Rogers and her 2 daughters has been vacant for 7 days, and they did not check out. They were the last seen at the hotel's restaurant at around 7:30, I believe, on the 1st. So by this time, Hal reported them missing back in Ohio.
Oh, that poor man.
Yes. And I'll get to him eventually, and it rips your heart out.
Oh no. Why did you do this after Oakland County?
I told you we're gonna rip out your heart for a couple weeks, and then we'll do something a little bit more lighthearted.
I don't like this.
Yeah. So, So, I believe that Joan did tell Hal, like, leeway of maybe a day or two of when she would be back. Like, don't be surprised we may stop on the way back and do something. But, like, the time had come and passed, and Hal was like, okay, where's my family? Because they would even send postcards, like, along the way back to him.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So police go to room 251 at the Days Inn, where the Rogers were staying, on June 8th. This is 4 days later. They got the call. They immediately went. I watched videos from this documentary that I watched. It's called Bodies in the Bay. And I believe it was done by, like, it was like a thing called Crime Stories. It was done like the early 2000s.
Okay.
And they show videos, like, there was, like, balloons in the corner. There were stuffed animals and like toys in the room and like makeup on the counter. There were shoes and like their suitcases on the floor.
Right.
Detective Capel said that it looked like someone had just stepped out for dinner and like had every intention of coming back.
Oh,
like
no.
That's essentially what it looked like. It looked like a hotel room with a mom and a couple teenage daughters. There was like shit everywhere. They had every intention of coming back to their hotel room.
Right.
So they dusted for fingerprints in the hotel room, and they determined from prints on a tube of toothpaste that they matched the bodies found in Tampa Bay. So they identified the bodies. Yeah, they were able to take the fingerprints from the bodies and identify them on a tube of toothpaste in this hotel room.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So they were identified as the bodies of Joan, Michelle, and Christe Rogers.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's a huge bummer. This whole thing is just a huge bummer. So once the victims were identified, investigators tried to retrace the family steps, and they notified Hal.
Oh my gosh, I bet that broke him.
Yeah. In the documentary that I watched, it's a really good documentary, but they interviewed him, and it's he's such a farmer. Like where he doesn't get like overly emotional, but obviously when they said that when they interviewed or when they did the documentary, they said it was like 13 years after the deaths. And he's just like, it's so depressing. I can't even. So about a mile away, they found the Rogers car, which was a 1984 blue Oldsmobile Calais, I think, with Ohio plates, abandoned at a boat dock by the Courtney Campbell Causeway. Inside the car, they found a travel brochure with handwritten directions on it and some days in stationery.
Handwritten directions.
Yeah, but that I'll get to it. Like they had the days in stationery, like that pad of paper,
right,
that you get on the desk of every hotel room,
right.
That had a note written on it. It was a description of a boat that was blue and white.
Oh no.
So the police went through pictures the family had taken on their vacation and the last picture taken on the camera, which was a picture of Michelle at the hotel. And it looked like she was like sitting on the floor of they said that it was like on the balcony or whatever. Either way, she was like sitting on the floor, and like her hair was damp, like she just got out of the shower. And it looked like one of those pictures that like your mom's like, oh, picture Michelle, and she's like, my hair's wet, I don't want to take a picture, like, so she looks irritated. Like that's what it looked like to me. And I was just like, that one of those that also rips my heart out.
Teenagers.
Like I'm on vacation and my mom wants to take lots of pictures, but I feel like I look like crap right now, so I don't want her to take my picture. No. Like that's exactly what it looked like to me. And I was like, oh God, that breaks my heart even more. So weeks passed and nothing came from interviews and the investigation. And the best leads at this point have been exhausted.
Yeah.
So the police decide to offer up a $5,000 reward for any information. But then 4 months later, still nothing, but Detective Capel discovers that a Canadian woman had been sexually assaulted aboard a blue and white boat in Tampa Bay 2 weeks before the Rogers women were murdered. There was a lot of similarities between these two incidents and it was known as the Madeira Beach rape. So there was a lot of similarities between the two. So Capel believed that this was a major lead, so he actually flew to Canada to interview this woman. She's not named, and even if I did know her name, I probably wouldn't say it because I'm sure she wants nothing to do with this.
Right.
So she tells him that her attacker was a middle-aged white man who convinced her to go out for a boat ride. Because people are down in Florida on vacation, so
right,
they might think that, oh, this is something that this guy does as a business, is that he offers boat rides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I would have been like, can I see a card or something? While on the boat, he bound her with duct tape and raped her. and he threatened to throw her overboard, where he told her, he was like, sharks will eat you, you'll never be found. And she told the investigators, she was like, yeah, I didn't know if there actually were sharks in there, but I definitely didn't want that. So she complied with what he said.
Oh my goodness.
And then he did go back to shore and let her go. So Capel believes that the Madeira Beach rapist is the same man who killed the Rogers women, which I think right away that's not exactly a bad assumption to make.
Well, no.
Because these women were also sexually assaulted.
Right.
So the Canadian woman gets with a sketch artist, and they make a composite sketch of her attacker. When the sketch is released to newspapers, of course, hundreds of tips pour in. Some of them seemed promising, but almost all of them turned out to be dead ends, unfortunately.
Right.
So investigators decided maybe Florida isn't where we should be looking. Maybe we should look at Ohio, where they're from. So, because they weren't getting anything in Florida. So
yeah.
I'll mention it later. They mentioned about how when you initially, when you start a murder investigation, you don't immediately think that's a serial killer. You usually start with the family.
Right.
And this one, they kind of worked a little backwards because they weren't from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, they had to work a little bit backwards, and then they interviewed the family.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the reasoning for it, I guess. But they started looking into the family and possible motives. So they interview Hal Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, they even studied postcards that the girls sent back home while on their trip. But it was
that poor man.
Yeah, it was seemingly a happy trip, so they didn't really get anything from the postcards.
Right.
Because he had them.
Yeah.
So this really pisses me off. So supposedly Hal showed little to no emotion at the girls' funeral. And it sparked rumors, of course, and that he may have had something to do with it. Because they were considering, I'll get to it. It's bullshit. But
well, everybody grieves differently.
I know. That's why it upsets me, because it's like, this man just lost his entire family.
Yeah.
Like, how do you expect him to be? Like, he has to get through the funeral somehow.
Yeah.
So
nobody sees him at home.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I mean,
they did consider Hal for like a second, but they were quickly able to rule him out because he was seen on the farm the day before and the day after the murders. So it would have been like near impossible with like flight schedules and stuff like that.
Right.
But they did also consider the possibility that he may have hired someone.
Man.
So while investigating Hal, they did find out that Hal had posted bail for his brother when the rape charge for the former roommate happened, even though they already knew about him molesting Michelle at that time.
Oh.
So it doesn't look great.
No.
But like the reason he gave it was like, well, I promised my family that I would. And I don't know. I might feel different if I were in that situation. I don't know. It's basically he decided to help his brother. I would have let him in there and rot, but I think Hal just had a little bit bigger of a heart than I do. So I don't know.
No.
It sounds not great.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. And then they did find out that Hal ended up taking out $7,000 out of his bank account around the time of the disappearance. But it was accounted for because they thought that maybe he had sent it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all accounted for. He literally just had it in his truck because he planned on using it after he reported the girls missing because he was going to go down to Florida. And then a couple days later, he was told that they were killed.
Right.
So once Hal was cleared, the police focused their attention on Hal's brother, John, the shitbag.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for like, maybe it's a revenge motive for Michelle coming forward, but Michelle dropped charges. So he would have gained nothing from Michelle being dead.
Right.
So they ruled out him as well. So with the family ruled out, there were no leads in the Madeira Beach rape. So a bunch of the investigators were taken off the case entirely.
Mm.
So now fast forward, June 1st, 1990, the 1-year anniversary of the murders.
Right.
It's been a year. More than 1,200 leads have been investigated, but at this point, the case is cold.
Right.
So then a man named Sergeant Glenn Moore was appointed to lead detective on the case, and he assembled a new team. Because at this point, they were like, this is a triple homicide. This needs to be solved.
Right.
So, because there was like a whole other thing in the documentary where it was like, people come to Florida to retire. They come here to vacation.
Mm-hmm.
These 3 women were here on vacation and were killed. So not only does it make your state look bad, but it's like they were here on vacation. That's like where a lot of revenue comes through. So it's like,
oh, right.
Like, how can we show people like this is still a good place to vacation, because it obviously clearly isn't, because
right.
Yeah, like these 3 women were murdered on their vacation, and the killer is still just out in the wind.
Just out there.
Exactly.
He's out there.
So they were under a lot of pressure to get this solved, which clearly it needed to be. So Glenn Moore appointed a new team. So they decided to go over everything that had already been found with a fine-tooth comb, because they think that maybe something may have been missed the first time around.
Right.
So no matter how insignificant something seemed, they went over it. They looked at ropes. They had a detective look at like physical evidence only, and she looked at like ropes. They looked at how they were tied, how the duct tape was put over their mouths, and photographs to work out the killer and how they believe the sequence of events happened. Because based on the examination of the way the ropes were tied, they believe Michelle struggled and managed to free at least one hand before she was thrown in the water. And Christe, they said that she like reversed her hands, like she was trying to get out of the rope before she was thrown in.
Right.
So while looking at everything, they got this working theory that they believe that the killer got pleasure from hurting someone in front of someone they loved.
Oh my gosh.
That was the big thing, is that they liked the fear.
Yeah.
So then they turned their attention to the items found in the family's car. The brochure hadn't been dusted for fingerprints originally, which is a big, I don't know why they didn't do that.
Right. It kind of seems like something you need to do.
Right. So they were able to get a palm print from it, and the handwriting on it hadn't been analyzed. So the directions were how to get to the hotel from somewhere in Tampa that was written on that brochure. There were directions. The handwriting was sent to a handwriting expert who determined that the directions written were not written by any of the Rogers women. Don't know how they came to the conclusion that it wasn't written by the women. Maybe they did. I think police may have taken some of the postcards.
That's what I'm thinking.
Possibly, but he determined that it was not from any of the women.
Okay.
So the investigators thought that maybe the family had gotten lost and asked someone for directions back to the hotel, and that someone would have known where they were going. Because at this point, they're pretty sure that the palm print and the handwriting belonged to the killer.
Okay.
So Sergeant Moore, this is crazy. Sergeant Moore asked the behavioral science unit at the FBI. Did I say FBI?
You did, and I was wondering what that was.
So the FBI.
B is in boy.
So he asked the behavioral science unit to make a profile of the killer. And I am so fascinated by FBI profiling.
Yeah.
It is nuts at how
seriously
scary accurate they are sometimes. So the profile said, The profiler said, and I don't know who the profiler is. I wish I could have found it, but I don't know. They said that this was a guy who lived in the area for quite some time, that he was probably just a normal guy.
Mm-hmm.
He knew the area very well and would know how to direct these women exactly to the hotel they were staying at. He was an established member of the community, so he wouldn't be able to just pack up and move.
Mm-hmm.
And the profile confirmed the police's theory that the killer planned the murder, chose the victims, isolated them, and used a weapon and duct tape to keep them in control.
Right.
He raped them and then weighed them down with cement blocks as he threw them into the water alive. And this is disgusting. The profile said the reason, because they considered, like, why didn't he put duct tape over their eyes? The profile said the reason he didn't put duct tape over their eyes is because he wanted to see the fear in their eyes as he tortured them. Yep. And the last thing that the profile said was that they were looking for a serial killer, that this was the work of a serial killer. They said, this man has killed before and will kill again because he chose to kill 3 women, and a first-time killer doesn't do that.
Well, right.
Yeah.
This is somebody that's comfortable with what he's doing.
Exactly. So now they're really losing their shit, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
So now it's 3 years later.
3 years later? Oh my gosh.
3 years later. Still nothing. So the investigators decided to launch a media blitz to draw, like, new attention to the case. Mm-hmm. And this was even featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in 91.
Oh, one of the original Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, the original one.
All right.
So, which I didn't watch. I could have, but at the time it was still unsolved. So I was like, oh, I want the solved portion.
All right.
So the police launched a press conference and offered up the handwriting and the brochure, saying that they believe that in all likelihood that this handwriting belonged to the killer and that he would kill again. They made that very clear in this new media blitz. They were like, he's dangerous and will do this again.
Wow.
So they interview Sergeant Glenn Moore in the documentary that I watched, and it was really interesting coming from him, because he said, in his own words, basically, he said that creating this new storm of media attention would most likely reach the killer. And basically, the strategy was to draw attention to the case to make the killer, nervous and scared, so that he would, slip up somehow.
Right.
Because you know how, killers will go for, a very long, extended period of time without getting caught, and then they, do that, one stupid thing.
End up stupid caught. Thing in his car, I don't know, speeding or running a stop sign.
Yeah, that one thing, because it reminds me of Bundy when he attacked the sorority house in Florida. That was so huge and so crazy that obviously he, or Israel Keys,
an escalation.
Yeah, or Israel Keys, the way he went so long with no ties to him, and then he decides to kidnap a girl and try and get ransom from her.
Right.
That's, yeah, we'll get to him eventually, but that's kind of what they were trying to do. They were trying to do it, trying to put all this out there so that the killer would do anything that would create suspicion from the people around him, and get people to come forward. So we're gonna backpedal a little bit and talk about a woman named Joanne Steffy. Originally, when the composite sketch came out, she had the composite sketch and ended up taping it on her fridge. And later, when she sees the handwriting, she thinks that it's a man that used to live a couple doors down from her. They interviewed her in the documentary, but kept her face blacked out.
Yeah.
She said that anytime that she would talk to this old neighbor, the hair on the back of her neck would stand up, and she would get the major creeps from him. In her words, she literally said, in her words, she was there was something not right about him. His mannerisms, he just wasn't right. Is her words. And have you ever met that person where you're like, oh, there's something
a
little off about you.
Uh-huh.
I think we've all been there.
I think everybody's been there.
Yeah. He scared her. Like, he genuinely scared her. And she even like talked in the documentary. She said that one night, she even caught him like watching her, like from a distance, like through her window. And this was after she had initially seen the composite sketch come out about the Madeira Beach rape.
Right.
And so she like saw him, turned her light out, and then she stood there and watched him watching her for a little while, and she was like,
that would be so creepy.
And I find that just horrifying, just not being able to feel safe in your own home because people are watching you. That's awful. That's the thing in nightmares.
Open right now. Not open, but like my curtains
curtains open and the lights on.
Open.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Of course, I'm on the second floor, so if
she was too.
That doesn't make me feel any better.
She said that she stood there for about like 5 to 10 minutes while he was just watching.
Now I know there's somebody outside my window now.
So she even apparently like brought this up to other neighbors, like, hey, this guy kind of looks like this sketch. And they thought that he was a creep too, but they thought that he didn't look anything like the sketch. So they basically told her, they're like, hey, I mean, if you call the cops though and give a tip, like, this could ruin his life. So she didn't call police when she thought that this neighbor looked like the sketch. Guess who this neighbor was? Oba Chandler.
My gosh.
Yeah. Also, he used to be a redhead, and that really hurts my feelings. So after the handwriting comes out and she sees this in newspapers, she calls police and gives them the tip that she thinks that it belongs to her old neighbor. But when they first put it out in newspapers, they got over like 1,000 tips. So unfortunately, it got lost in the tips.
Yeah.
So June 30th, 1992, Sergeant Moore starts displaying the handwriting on billboards across the city. And this was the first like such use of billboards by law enforcement in the United States.
Wow.
Of course, like now, like they'll put like missing persons on and everything, but this is the first time that law enforcement used billboards to aid in investigation. Yeah. That's one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this story. So this prompts another very unhappy call from Joanne Steffy. She's like, hey, fuckers. Like, I already called you and told you.
Probably a direct quote.
Probably. So apparently she kept calling for about like 2 months straight.
Wow.
Before like she was able to like really get a hold of someone.
Well, good for her.
So Sergeant Moore was sent someone out. He had signed like a contract with like a renter or something, or a landlord, something of that nature. And Joanne Steffy knew that this person, this landlord or this renter, I don't remember the situation, but she was able to know that like they had like an original copy of something that he like wrote and signed on. So Sergeant Moore sent someone out to get this original copy with Oba Chandler's handwriting on it. So through handwriting analysis, and in the documentary, they actually like matched up specific letters, like from the handwriting on the brochure and Oba Chandler's handwriting. They analyzed like the capital T, a lowercase a, different kind of stuff, and they're very similar. Because I know handwriting analysis aren't like it's not like DNA. It's not like an exact science, and sometimes can be not great. It's kind of like
polygraph test.
Yeah. That's kind of how I view it, where it's like it's not an exact science, but I mean, yeah, they can look similar, but forgery is also a very good thing.
Right.
Very good thing, a very prevalent thing.
I'm just, you know, what I'm saying? Right, it is.
Like, yeah, that's great. Anyway,
it is a good thing.
So through handwriting analysis, the two samples were matched conclusively. They matched.
Mm-hmm.
The palm print found on the brochure was also matched to Oba Chandler.
Oh, well, yeah, I imagine they have it with all of his stupid background.
Exactly. And he sold his boat and left town with his family soon after the billboards appeared. He just moved to a different place in Florida. Yeah. He and his wife at the time moved from their home on Dalton Avenue in Tampa to Port Orange near Daytona Beach.
Oh, he was married?
5 times, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I've seen pictures of him as a younger guy. He's not a bad looking guy, younger, but then he gets a little older and he looks disgusting. He's one of those people. And the thing is, I would never judge someone on their appearance, but he's garbage. So I don't fucking care.
Right.
And he's dead. So he ended up moving from Tampa to Port Orange near Daytona Beach. And he also lived directly across the bay from the boat dock where the Roger family car was found.
Wow.
Then they did a background check and saw his very extensive criminal record.
Yeah.
And the Canadian woman who was raped, Oba's car and boat were matches to her descriptions.
Mm.
And the composite sketch of her attacker matched what Oba looked like 3 years prior. So,
gotcha.
But this is all circumstantial. So we're going to keep going.
Right. It is. I mean,
right.
The palm print, not so much. I mean, that's a match.
Yeah. But it could have been just he gave them directions.
Right.
Doesn't mean that he killed them.
Right.
So the investigators' theory was that the Rogers got lost and met Oba Chandler, who gave them directions. That they know for a fact. Because later he will admit to that. He probably, they assume that he probably used the fact that he was also from Ohio to make a connection.
Right.
Probably offered them a boat ride later that evening.
Mm-hmm.
They think the Rogers women boarded his boat between 8:30 and 9 and that they were dead by 3 a.m. the next day.
Oh my gosh.
So now they know who he is, but they don't have enough evidence to bring him in for murder. So Sergeant Moore decided to reopen the Madeira Beach rape investigation. So they showed a picture of Oba to the Canadian woman, and she identified him as her attacker.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, Oba is put on round-the-clock surveillance. They tap his phone. An unmarked detective tails him at all times, and they even put like a camera like near his front door on his house. I don't know how they were able to do that without him knowing.
Oh no.
Right?
That's intense.
Right. So I'm like, damn, they are sly as hell.
Seriously.
Yeah. So eventually they did arrest him for the Madeira Beach rape. And I'm not sure what like the final like go ahead was.
Right.
I'm not sure, but he was brought in, and there's a video of him being like brought in originally for the Madeira rape, and he's handcuffed, and there's a cameraman like from a news station that's like you're looking from that camera's view, and as he gets closer to the camera, he like put his elbow up like and like moved the camera away from his face, like very it irked me because I hate him. So then they interviewed people around him, and people would say he was odd. Like he was really odd. And some people were uncomfortable around him because he seemed way too friendly around women. He was like a sweet talker. Like he was one of those people where like he was just really good at lying and really good at spewing bullshit. Because like I saw a later interview of him in prison, and he seems really convincing.
He does that.
Because he continued to maintain innocence and be like, I just had the unfortunate, circumstance of meeting these women, and I just gave them directions. He went through everything that he told them, and like I said, he sounds very convincing. Like I'll yeah. So now he's in custody. But the state's attorney needs more evidence to convict him. obviously.
Obviously, right.
So, yeah, so they search his house, but it's like they're probably not going to find anything there. And even dredge the canal behind it looking for clues, just anything. He did sell his Bayliner after the murders because he had a Bayliner boat, but the police managed to track it down. I don't know if they actually found anything on the boat as far as trace evidence goes. I don't have that information, but the Canadian woman identified it as the boat that she was attacked on.
Gotcha.
So the trial comes September 19th, 1994. So we're 5 years.
And this is just the trial for the Canadian woman then, huh?
No, this is the murder trial.
Oh, this is the murder trial. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because they started the trial with this circumstantial evidence, but the police kept investigating. Like through everything, because I think it was kind of like everything was kind of like tied into one. I'm sure there were other things along the way. So the defense attorney, Oba's attorney, named Fred Zinneber. So his main argument was the fact that they had basically all circumstantial evidence, which they did.
Right.
They had no physical evidence to tie him to the murder, and Oba was very, very adamant that he did come into contact with the three women, but did not kill them.
Right.
Which, when you look at the evidence, I mean, can you really prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these murders? You can't. It's all circumstantial.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately,
right, it's unfortunate, but like as of yet, they don't have anything. There's no smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's 89, and I don't think that they really pulled any DNA or anything, because I don't think that was quite a very used practice yet. I think it was still in its infancy.
Right.
Well,
and so, what DNA are you going to be able to pull from the women when they were in water for a few days?
Exactly. And he did sell the boat after the murders, so there might not have even been a trace of DNA left from the women on that boat.
On the boat, right.
Plus, I mean, by the time that they got to the boat, I think it was 3 years, between like 3 and 5 years,
right,
of it going in and out of the water from new owners, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So during the trial, the police were still investigating, like I said, because they were trying to at least put him in the bay, which they did manage to do.
Oh, good.
They got phone records from his house, which took a long time for them to be able to do, because they were trying, and they eventually did get phone records from his home. And the police found evidence of ship-to-shore telephone calls made from his boat during the time frame of the murders and the Madeira Beach rape.
Oh.
So they were able to put him on the water during both events.
Wow.
Because, like, obviously, you're trying to show an alibi.
Well, right.
Yeah. So during the trial, Oba Chandler said he did meet Joan, Michelle, and Christe Rogers and gave them directions, but he never saw them again except in newspaper coverage and on billboards.
Mm-hmm.
He acknowledged he was on Tampa Bay that night, but stuck to his story that he was fishing alone. He claimed,
convenient.
Because all the calls made around like the time of the murders were between, like, I think they said like 1 a.m. and like 10 a.m. on June 2nd.
That's odd.
Yeah, but June 1st, the Rogers women board his boat that night, and eventually they were thrown overboard.
So the calls were made on June 2nd
at 1 a.m.
1 a.m. That's what I'm saying. That's
odd. So still the night of
being out there at 1 a.m. Why are you out there at 1 a.m. fishing alone? Really?
He has a reason. So he claimed that he spent all night on the boat because his engine wouldn't start, which he thought was a gas line leak. He also said that he called the Coast Guard and the Florida Marine Patrol and even flagged down a patrol boat, but both were too busy to help. So he says that he fixed the line himself with duct tape and was able to return to shore safely. The prosecutor even so there was of course cross-examination. The prosecutor even showed him a picture and was like, hey, point out where this would have been, that sort of thing, which is funny.
That's awesome.
So there were no records of distress calls from Oba to the Coast Guard or the Marine Patrol that night, nor were there any Coast Guard boats on the bay at the time that could have helped.
Nice.
I flagged them down and they were like, we're too busy. So there was a boat mechanic that they consulted with that they did bring in for the trial. And he said that Oba's explanation of repairing the boat's apparent gas leak would not have been possible. So they go into it, and I don't understand because I'm not a boat person. I don't even know how to fucking swim. So Oba had a bay liner, and the fuel lines on a bay liner were directed upward. So a leak would have sprayed fuel into the air, not into the boat, and the gas line would have dissolved the adhesive of the duct tape that he claimed that he fixed the leak with. So I don't know.
Like I know things.
Exactly. I have no clue. So I was just like, yeah, that sounds great. I know nothing of boats.
Believable to me.
Right. I've been on one in my two. I take that back. I've been on 2 boats. The prosecutor kept pressing him over this. The boat issue, that was the biggest thing that they were trying to trip him up on. So he kept pressing him. The prosecutor's name was a man named Douglas Crowe, which he was also interviewed in the documentary that I watched. So he kept pressing him over the boat issue, and Oba, he would get he was getting visibly upset, his face was getting red, and was tripping up on his words and everything. And even at one point he turned to the judge and was like, I'm sorry, he just really irritates me. What does it? And the judge was pretty much like, well, this is one of my best prosecutors, so get your shit together and just answer him, basically, giving him no sympathy, don't care, he can irritate you all he wants. So he kept being he was really shook from all these questions, and he kept being tripped up by the prosecutor to the point where he wasn't making sense.
Well, yeah.
So there were a lot of witnesses that they brought forward. There were a lot of women who came forward to say that he had raped them on his boat and other places.
Wow.
His daughter even testified to kind of what a shitty person he was. Because I don't know how many kids he had, but he did have several. Because I read that later they came forward, and there's some of them that thought that he was innocent, some of them that thought that yeah, he definitely did this.
Right.
The whole thing. There was even a woman that testified that she said she worked at the Days Inn, and she said that she even saw him at the hotel, but this was never verified. This is just someone that said that they saw him. I don't think that that's true. It may have been just some other older white guy that looked like him. So the jury took a little over an hour to deliberate. September 29th, 1984, they find him guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. A month later, he appeared in front of a judge for sentencing. So I don't know if this was said consecutively, but I have a couple things from the judge that she said. She said, 1 victim was first, 2 watched. Imagine the fear. 1 victim was second, 1 watched. Imagine the horror. Finally, the last victim, who had seen the other 2 disappear over the side, was lifted up and thrown overboard. Imagine the terror. Oba Chandler, you have not only forfeited your right to live among us under the laws of the state of Florida, you have forfeited the right to live at all.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
So he was given a death sentence.
Wow.
And it was known that not everybody on the jury was in favor of the death penalty, but the verdict for death was unanimous. Everybody voted the death penalty for him.
Wow.
Because they weighed all these options, because one of the biggest things that they had to decide was sentencing, obviously, but one of the biggest reasons is because it was known during the trial, and they some of the jurors even was like, he gives me the fucking creeps. He's his face, like I said, like as a younger guy, like he was pretty good looking, but like during the trial, and I've seen some interviews and like pictures of him, he's very creepy.
Oh.
But one of the biggest things about this case was the fact that he derived pleasure from watching fear on their faces. He
Right.
tortured these women in front of each other. They
Mhm.
had to watch their family be tortured and then thrown over the side of a boat to drown because they were thrown over alive.
Right.
So it's very rough. So they felt comfortable enough to give this man a death sentence.
Damn.
So he was sent to the Union Correctional Institution where he served his sentence. Years later, many appeals later, his last appeal was in May of 2007 and was denied. So his execution was set for November 15th, 2011. He was executed at 4:08 p.m. He had no final statement but left a written statement saying, "You are killing an innocent man today."
Interesting.
Yeah. So Joan, Michelle, and Christy were buried in their hometown on June 13th, 1989. After a funeral service with 300 friends and family.
Oh my gosh.
Police even attended to keep reporters and television crews out of the church during the service.
Good.
So, again, like I said, I watched the documentary where they interview Hal, and it was not only like emotional because his family was killed, but it was also like kind of a financial burden as well, because they worked on his farm, like it was a family farm. So he ended up having to hire workers to help him on the farm.
Right.
He said to this day he sometimes has a hard time dealing. He's in the interview he said even now it sometimes still doesn't seem real.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah, he recalled dealing, like they show him like working on his farm,
Right.
and he recalled dealing with the death of his family, saying that he was like, you know, this was obviously really hard, but I was surrounded by some very good friends. And this one really broke me because he said that there were days where he would just go to his friend's house and just curl up on the couch and sleep, and they would just let him just sleep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, thanks for the stomp on the heart. So, Oba Chandler being executed over, it was circumstantial.
Yeah.
Even though they were able to put him on the bay, they still had nothing that was considered their smoking gun, was being able to put him in the bay the night of the murders and the night of the rape. That was the biggest thing, but still kind of circumstantial. However, if you're still feeling that way, don't worry. I have another thing.
Okay.
So on February 25th, 2014, investigators revealed that DNA evidence identified Oba as the murderer of a woman named Ivelisse. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Ivelisse Berrios Bergier. I'm so sorry. I most definitely butchered that.
More than likely.
Ivelisse was raped and strangled in Coral Springs, Florida on November 27th, 1990.
Oh, so that's right after he moved then.
That's right. And need I remind you that the FBI profiler said that this was a serial killer.
Right.
So she was a 20-year-old newlywed and was last seen at Sawgrass Mills Mall, where she worked as at a sporting goods store.
Oh my goodness.
When she didn't come home, her husband went to the mall to look for her and found her car with the tires slashed.
Oh, wow.
So it's believed that after watching her for a couple days,
being a fucking creep,
Oba slashed the tires and offered some help, like, you know, a good Samaritan. 3 hours after she was reported missing, her body was found under a residential mailbox in a local neighborhood. She was naked and had ligature marks on both wrists and legs. and brown tape stuck to her hair. The case is considered solved and closed.
I wonder what the DNA evidence was that they found.
I don't know. I couldn't find that. Because that's still, I mean, it's 2014, but that's still like relatively new.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure. Because there was, I mean, when you look him up, there's plenty of coverage of him being executed.
Right.
Which I'm not real sad about. But I will say, like, I don't okay, disagree with me all you want, that's fine. But at the time, I just don't think that there was enough evidence to give him a death sentence.
Yeah,
There really wasn't.
I can see that.
I understand the reasoning behind it, just like the absolute horror and just the details of this is awful. Absolutely awful. So I do understand the sentence. I just don't think there was enough physical evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this. However, now that there has been confirmed DNA evidence of him murdering somebody else, it makes me feel a little bit better about the Rogers family.
Right.
Because obviously they got their justice.
Right.
And yeah. So that's Oba Chandler, the garbage pile, and the murder of Joan, Michelle, and Christe Rogers.
Gosh.
And Ivelisse as well. And again, I'm so sorry. I'm so horrible at pronouncing things, and I know for a fact that I butchered that poor woman's name, but she needs to be mentioned as well because she's now part of this, unfortunately. So that's the case. Yeah. Like I said last week, I'm sorry. It's not going to be any better.
No.
This week, yeah.
No.
Also very rough.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
And I was going to say, our friend did message me in the middle of this, said, yes, we could use her name.
It's Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Thank you, Chelsea.
We take back what we said about you not answering us.
Yes. So yes, thank you for joining us this week for Oba Chandler. He's been on my list for a little while, and I just wanted to get him done and over with because he's disgusting.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like when I first brought up the woman that he like rubbed a barrel of a gun across her stomach?
Yep.
Because he likes watching people be scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm smiling because it makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I swear I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us this week. Maybe next week Paige might have a little something.
I'm trying to find light and fluffy. So we'll see what that ends up being.
Yeah. Something maybe not super light, a little lighter. A little bit. Maybe like an old murder.
Because those are lighter.
Maybe, I don't know.
How far does it have to go back for it to be a light murder?
You're right.
I know.
Maybe something a little more like, ooh, spooky, paranormal.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Although those typically end up in death too, though, so we'll see.
When there's a ghost, there's usually a death involved. So,
yeah, we'll see.
Alrighty. Also, shout out to the person that recognized Paige today.
Yeah, that was so cool.
I know. It's pretty fun. It's really awesome. And thank you everybody for joining us and continuing to join us. So you can follow us on Facebook at
2KOA.
And you can follow us on Instagram at 2KOA Podcast. I know I barely upload on it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I have to take over, Facebook.
Right. Paige does a lot. She does Facebook for our podcast.
Payton just does, all the editing,
Everything else.
and the all of the things. So, but gosh, like she can't get an Instagram.
Right. That Facebook is really hard to manage.
Hey, we're almost at 200 likes, so tell your friends.
Yeah, and you can follow us on Instagram at 2Kway Podcast, and we do have a Gmail, which is what our friend sent our email to. It is 2kwaypodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to contact us. If you have insight or if you want to suggest something, that would be great too.
We'd love suggestions.
Absolutely. Because we do have like a list that we want to get through, and that's just something that can be added to our list. So
Yes.
we also do have a YouTube channel. It is 2Kway Podcast. Every time you type out the word 2, it's actually the number 2. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcast, I don't know if there's any other podcast that rate and review, but I know Apple Podcast does. So if you'd like to leave us a little review, maybe give us some stars, we would really appreciate it. Because a big ways that podcasts can be shared with people is just word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously when we go up in rankings on Apple Podcasts, we get a little bit more view, a little bit more attention. So we would really appreciate it.
And we love attention.
Okay. I'm going to let you have that. Alrighty. Well, we'll see you next week. Sorry for the huge downer again. We love you. Bye.